The crystalline halls of the Catherian High Council echoed with cold judgment as Princess Zara stood motionless before the 7 supreme arbiters. Her pale blue skin seemed to glow under the harsh artificial lights, and her silver eyes remained fixed on the geometric patterns carved into the floor. She had known this day would come since her 16th cycle when the physicians first discovered her genetic abnormality. Arbiter Prime Kex raised his elongated hand, and silence fell across the vast chamber. His voice carried the weight of absolute authority as he began the formal pronouncement. Princess Zara of the 3rd Royal Bloodline, you stand accused of genetic contamination and emotional instability. The Council has reviewed your biological data and psychological evaluations. The evidence is undeniable. Zara lifted her chin slightly but said nothing. Around the curved walls of the chamber, hundreds of lesser nobles watched in perfect stillness. In Catherian society, public disgrace was observed with the same clinical detachment as a scientific experiment. Your reproductive system has been deemed incompatible with our species, Arbiter Prime Kex continued. Furthermore, your psychological profiles reveal dangerous tendencies toward what primitive species call emotional attachment. You have been observed forming irrational bonds with subordinates and displaying concern for their welfare beyond their functional utility. The words struck Zara like physical blows, but she forced herself to remain rigid. Showing emotion now would only confirm their accusations. Arbiter Nex, a thin female with sharp, angular features, leaned forward in her floating chair. The medical council has determined that your defects are not merely individual flaws, but represent a potential evolutionary regression. Your genetic line threatens the purity our ancestors achieved through millennia of selective breeding. Zara finally spoke, her voice steady despite the turmoil within. I have served the Empire faithfully. My tactical innovations increased mining efficiency in the outer sectors by 12.7%. My diplomatic missions to the Helix Confederation prevented 3 potential conflicts. Irrelevant, Arbiter Prime Kex declared. Your accomplishments cannot overcome your fundamental biological failure. A royal who cannot produce pure offspring has no value to the Empire. Your emotional instabilities make you unsuitable for any leadership role. The truth behind his words cut deeper than Zara had anticipated. She had always known she was different from her siblings, but she had hoped her achievements might compensate for her deficiencies. The cold logic of Catherian society left no room for such sentiment. The Council hereby strips you of all royal titles and privileges. Arbiter Nex announced. You are banished from all Catherian worlds and territories. You will be transported to the primitive planet designation Earthsol 3, where your genetic contamination can cause no further damage to our civilization. Zara felt something crack inside her chest, a sensation her people had no name for but which humans would have recognized as heartbreak. Earth was known throughout the galaxy as a dumping ground for the unwanted. Criminals, genetic failures, and political dissidents were routinely exiled there to live out their meaningless lives among the barbaric inhabitants. 2 guards in ceremonial armor stepped forward, their weapons humming with contained energy. Zara raised her hand to stop them. I will go willingly, she said, but I request permission to speak. Arbiter Prime Kex nodded once, a gesture of minimal respect for her royal blood. Even though that blood was now considered tainted, Zara turned to face the assembled nobles. You call my emotions a weakness, but they have shown me truths you cannot see. When I formed bonds with those under my command, they fought harder and achieved more than any troops motivated by duty alone. When I felt concern for conquered peoples, I found ways to secure their cooperation without the resource drain of constant military occupation. Her voice grew stronger as she continued. Perhaps what you call genetic contamination is actually evolution. Perhaps the universe is trying to teach our species something we have forgotten in our pursuit of cold perfection. Murmurs rippled through the chamber, quickly silenced by the Arbiter's disapproving stares. Enough, Arbiter Prime Kex commanded. Your words only confirm the depth of your contamination. Guards, escort the former princess to her transport. As Zara walked between her escorts, she caught glimpses of faces in the crowd. Some showed the expected indifference, but others revealed something else, a flicker of curiosity, even sympathy. Perhaps she was not the only one who questioned the rigid perfection of their society. The transport ship was a converted cargo vessel, barely suitable for living beings. Zara was given a small chamber with basic life support and told the journey to Earth would take 47 standard days. As the ship departed from the capital world of Kythera Prime, she pressed her hand against the small porthole and watched her homeworld shrink to a distant star. The days passed in isolation. Zara spent her time reviewing everything she knew about Earth and its inhabitants. The official records described humans as primitive, violent, and chaotic. They lived short lives and made decisions based on irrational impulses rather than logical analysis. Their societies were unstable, constantly changing, and riddled with conflict. Yet something in those descriptions intrigued her. Humans formed bonds they called families that extended beyond genetic relationships. They created art for no functional purpose. They sacrificed their own welfare for abstract concepts like love and honor. To Kytherian eyes, these behaviors seemed insane, but Zara found herself wondering what drove such dedication to things that could not be measured or quantified. As Earth grew larger in the view screen, Zara made a decision that would have horrified the High Council. Instead of simply surviving her exile, she would try to understand these strange creatures and their irrational ways. Perhaps in learning about human emotions, she might finally understand her own. The transport ship entered Earth atmosphere with little ceremony. Automated systems guided it to a remote landing site in what human maps called Montana, far from major population centers. As Zara stepped out onto alien soil for the first time, she breathed air that tasted different from the perfectly filtered atmosphere of Kytherian worlds. Above her head, an unfamiliar sun cast light that seemed warmer somehow, and strange sounds filled the air. Wind moving through vegetation, calls from unknown creatures, and in the distance, the mechanical noise of human technology. Princess Zara of Kythera no longer existed. What remained was simply Zara, alone on a world that might hold the key to understanding what she was meant to become. Dr. Amy Mitchell had been tracking the unusual energy signature for 3 days when she finally located its source. Her modified all-terrain vehicle crested the rocky hill overlooking Clearwater Valley, and there in the meadow below sat something that definitely did not belong on Earth. The craft was unlike anything in human aerospace engineering. Its surface seemed to shift between metallic and crystalline, reflecting the Montana sky in patterns that hurt to look at directly. Smoke or steam rose from what might have been exhaust. Ports in the grass around it had taken on an odd blue-green tint. Amy parked her vehicle and approached on foot, her portable scanner clicking rapidly as radiation levels spiked and fell in seemingly random patterns. She had spent 15 years studying xenobiology, most of it theoretical since no confirmed alien life had ever been discovered. Now she stood 50 meters from proof that humanity was not alone in the universe. The craft made no sound as an opening appeared in its side. Amy froze, her hand instinctively moving toward the emergency beacon on her belt. Then she saw the figure that emerged from the ship. The being was humanoid, but clearly not human. Tall and graceful, with pale blue skin that seemed to have an inner light, she moved with fluid precision. Her hair was white as starlight, and her eyes were the color of liquid silver. She wore what appeared to be a form-fitting bodysuit that changed color as she moved. For a long moment, the two females stared at each other across the meadow. Then the alien raised her hands, palms outward, in what Amy hoped was a universal gesture of peace. Amy took a tentative step forward. "Hello," she called out, feeling somewhat foolish but not knowing what else to do. The alien tilted her head, processing the sound. When she spoke, her voice was melodious but tinged with something Amy recognized as sadness. "I am Zara," she said in perfectly accented English. "I mean no harm to your people." "Amy," came the reply. "Amy Mitchell, how do you speak our language?" "My people have studied this world for many generations. We learned your communications before you discovered radio waves." Zara gestured toward her ship. "This vessel is damaged. I cannot leave." Amy noticed the exhaustion in the alien's posture, the way she swayed slightly as if struggling to remain upright. Whatever had brought her here, she was clearly in distress. "Are you hurt?" Amy asked. moving closer despite every survival instinct screaming at her to run. "Not physically," Zara replied. "But I am alone for the first time in my existence. My people have cast me out." Something in the alien's tone struck Amy as deeply familiar. She had heard that same note of abandonment in her own voice years ago, when her family had disowned her for choosing science over tradition. "Come with me," Amy said impulsively. "I have a research station not far from here. You need shelter." Zara stared at her for a long moment. "You would help someone who is not of your species. Where I come from, we help people in trouble regardless of where they were born." The Catherian princess looked puzzled by this concept, but she nodded and followed Amy to the vehicle. The Clearwater Research Station was a modest facility dedicated to studying extremophile organisms and atmospheric chemistry. Amy had chosen the isolated location specifically to avoid bureaucratic interference with her work. Now she was grateful for the privacy as she led an alien refugee into her small laboratory. Over the following days, Amy learned fragments of Zara's story. The alien spoke reluctantly about her exile, describing a society so coldly logical that emotional responses were considered genetic defects. She had been banished not for any crime but for the capacity to feel. "Your people cast you out for having emotions," Amy asked one evening as they shared a simple dinner. "Among my kind, emotions are seen as evolutionary weakness," Zara explained. "They cloud judgment and lead to irrational decisions. A ruler who feels compassion for enemies or attachment to subordinates cannot serve the empire efficiently." Amy shook her head in disbelief. "But emotions are what make us who we are. Love, compassion, even anger. They drive us to protect what matters, to create beauty, to sacrifice for others." "These concepts are foreign to Catherian understanding," Zara said. "We reproduce through genetic compatibility calculations. We form alliances based on mutual benefit. We create only what serves a function." "That sounds lonely." Zara paused, her silver eyes meeting Amy's. "I did not understand the meaning of loneliness until I came here. On Kythera, I was simply aware that I was different. Now I comprehend what I was missing." Their conversation was interrupted by the sound of helicopters approaching. Amy rushed to the window and saw military aircraft circling the station. "We have company," she said grimly. Lieutenant Kate Sullivan of the U.S. Space Force had been tracking unusual electromagnetic signatures for 2 weeks. When satellites detected the energy burst over Montana, she knew her patience had finally paid off. The black helicopters touched down outside the research station with practiced precision, and Kate led her team toward the building. She expected to find evidence of foreign technology, possibly a crashed experimental aircraft. She did not expect to walk into the laboratory and come face to face with a being that was clearly not from Earth. "Dr. Mitchell," Kate said calmly, though her hand rested on her sidearm. "Step away from the subject." "Her name is Zara," Amy replied, moving protectively between the alien and the soldiers. "She's not a threat." Kate studied the extraterrestrial with professional interest. The being showed no signs of aggression, but her posture suggested someone accustomed to command. "I'm Lieutenant Sullivan. We need to talk." What followed was a tense negotiation. Kate had orders to secure any alien technology or personnel, but Amy refused to let them take Zara by force. The alien herself remained silent, watching the humans with keen interest. Finally, Zara spoke. "I will come with you willingly if Dr. Mitchell is permitted to accompany me as an advisor." Kate considered this. Her orders were to gather intelligence, and having a xenobiologist present might prove useful. "Agreed, but we do this my way." The convoy that left Clearwater Station included 2 additional passengers Kate had not expected. Dr. Lisa Chen, a geneticist from the University of Montana, had been Amy's graduate student before joining the military research program. When Kate contacted her for consultation, Lisa insisted on joining the team. "If we're really dealing with an extraterrestrial, this could rewrite everything we know about biology," Lisa argued over the secure communication link. The temporary facility at Malmstrom Air Force Base became an impromptu first contact center. In a secure laboratory, Lisa began conducting preliminary studies of Zara's biology with the aliens' consent. What she discovered defied conventional understanding. Her cellular structure is unlike anything on Earth, Lisa explained to the assembled team, but there are similarities to human genetics that shouldn't exist. It's as if someone took human DNA and optimized it. Optimized how? Kate asked. Enhanced durability, improved neural connectivity, extended lifespan. But here's the interesting part. She has genetic sequences that appear completely inactive like evolutionary remnants. Zara, who had been listening silently, finally spoke. Those sequences are not remnants, they are suppressed. My people have spent thousands of years breeding out what they consider genetic contamination. What kind of contamination? Amy asked. The capacity for emotional bonding, the ability to form attachments that transcend logical benefit, what you call love. Lisa stared at her readouts. That's impossible. Emotional responses are neurochemical, not genetic. Among Catherians, they are both, Zara explained. We evolved as a species that forms deep bonds, but our civilization decided such bonds were inefficient. They bred emotional capacity out of the population, except for occasional throwbacks like myself. Kate leaned forward. You're saying your people deliberately removed their ability to feel beyond what serves the state, Zara confirmed. I was born with active sequences that allow for emotional attachment. This made me unsuitable for leadership and reproductively incompatible with normal Catherians. Over the following weeks, something unprecedented began to happen. As Zara spent time with the humans, her suppressed genetic sequences started showing activity. Lisa's daily scans revealed changes that should have taken generations to manifest. It's as if her DNA is remembering how to be emotional, Lisa told Amy privately. But that's not the strangest part. Her reproductive system is also changing. Changing how? It's adapting. Becoming compatible with species that bond emotionally rather than just genetically. I've never seen anything like it. Amy found Zara sitting alone in the observation lounge, staring out at the Montana sky. How are you feeling? That question itself would be meaningless to most of my people, Zara replied. But I'm beginning to understand its importance. I feel hopeful and grateful, and something else I cannot name. What's that? The desire to protect and nurture. Amy, I think I am beginning to understand what your species calls maternal instinct. Neither of them realized that Catherian scout ships had detected the energy changes radiating from Earth. What they had dismissed as their princess's death was actually her transformation into something their cold calculations could not predict or control. The exile was becoming something new, and the Empire would soon discover that emotions were not weakness but evolution in action. 3 months after Zara first arrived on Earth, Dr. Lisa Chen made a discovery that shattered everything she thought she knew about biology. The morning had started normally enough at the expanded research facility that had grown around their alien visitor. Lisa was running her daily scans of Zara when the equipment began registering readings that should have been impossible. Amy, you need to see this, Lisa called across the laboratory. Amy Mitchell hurried over from where she had been reviewing atmospheric data with their guest. Zara herself looked up from the human book she had been reading with growing fascination. What is it? Amy asked. Lisa pointed at the bioscanner display. According to these readings, Zara is pregnant. The silence that followed was broken only by the hum of electronic equipment. Amy stared at the display, then at Lisa, then at Zara, who had gone perfectly still. That cannot be correct, Zara said finally. I have had no physical contact with any male of any species. The readings must be an error. But Lisa ran the scan 3 more times with different equipment. Each result was the same. Zara was carrying a developing life form. Dr. Marie Foster arrived at the facility within 6 hours of Lisa calling her Marie, had been the chief physician at the nearest major hospital before being recruited into what was now being called the First Contact Medical Team. She brought with her equipment that made Lisa existing scanners look like toys from the previous century. Marie conducted her own examination with Zara cooperation. The results confirmed what Lisa had detected, but added details that made the situation even more extraordinary. The developing entity shows genetic markers from both human and Catherian DNA, Marie explained to the assembled team, but the conception appears to have occurred without traditional fertilization. The cellular development suggests something that science has no framework to explain. Lieutenant Kate Sullivan, who had become the military liaison for the project, leaned forward in her chair. Are you saying this happened without any physical contact? The evidence suggests the pregnancy resulted from some form of emotional or energy-based conception. Marie replied, The developing being appears to be a response to Zara's psychological and emotional changes rather than biological reproduction. Zara had been listening in growing wonder rather than fear. In the oldest Catherian texts, there are legends of our ancestors, who could create life through will and desire alone, she said. But those stories were dismissed as primitive mythology. Amy moved closer to her alien friend. How do you feel about this? I feel something I have never experienced before, Zara replied. A connection to the life growing within me that transcends biology. It is as if my desire to understand human concepts of love and family has somehow manifested as actual creation. Grace Williams arrived the next day. She was a midwife who had spent 40 years helping bring new life into the world in rural Montana. When Amy contacted her through mutual friends, Grace's response had been simple and direct. Honey. I don't care if the mother has blue skin and silver eyes, Grace had said over the phone. A woman having a baby needs someone who understands what she's going through. Grace took one look at Zara and immediately began treating her exactly like any other expectant mother. This approach seemed to comfort the alien princess more than all the high-tech medical equipment. First babies are always an adventure, Grace told Zara as she demonstrated breathing exercises. Doesn't matter what planet you from, the basic process is pretty much the same. Your body knows what to do even if your mind doesn't understand it. But while the humans celebrated this miracle, other eyes were watching from the darkness of space. Admiral Vex commanded the Catherian Third Fleet from his flagship high above the outer planets of the Sol system. He was Zara's brother, though such family connections meant little in their emotionless society. What mattered was that he had been sent to investigate the unusual energy signatures emanating from the third planet. The readings are unmistakable, reported his science officer. The exile is not only alive but generating bioenergy patterns that should be genetically impossible. Admiral Vex studied the data with growing alarm. His sister had been banished as a genetic defective incapable of reproduction. Yet the energy signatures suggested not only successful conception, but something far worse from the Catherian perspective. She has created life through emotional bonding, he said with disgust. The contamination has reached its final stage. The Catherian High Council received Admiral Vex's report with collective horror. Princess Zara had not simply survived her exile. She had done something that threatened the very foundation of their civilization. She had proven that emotions could generate life itself on Earth. General Lucy Hayes was having the worst day of her military career. The newly formed Galactic Defense Corps had been created specifically to handle extraterrestrial threats. Now she sat in a secure briefing room staring at satellite images that showed 17 alien warships positioning themselves at the edge of the solar system. They demanding we surrender the alien and her offspring, reported Colonel Susan Webb. Their communication was broadcast on multiple frequencies. Simultaneously, there was no ambiguity in their message. General Hayes studied the tactical displays. The alien ships were each roughly the size of aircraft carriers, but with technology that made human weapons look primitive. Earth had missiles and fighters. The aliens had energy weapons that could probably vaporize entire cities. What do we know about their intentions? She asked. They refer to the pregnancy as an abomination that threatens their species' purity. Colonel Webb replied. They want to study the child and then terminate it along with the mother. In the medical facility, Zara felt the first contractions begin. She was surrounded by her chosen human family, Amy holding her hand, Lisa monitoring the equipment, Marie checking. Vital signs, Grace coaching her through each wave of sensation. I can sense them, Zara said between contractions. My people have come. They want to destroy what I have created. Over my dead body, Amy replied fiercely. The labor progressed rapidly. As if the developing child was eager to enter the world, Grace had delivered hundreds of babies. But she had never seen anything like this. The delivery room filled with a soft light that seemed to emanate from Zara herself. As the contractions intensified, something unprecedented began happening throughout the solar system. Every Catherian ship detected the same phenomenon. The energy field generated by the birth was affecting their crew's soldiers, who had never felt doubt, began questioning their orders. Engineers who had worked with cold efficiency suddenly found themselves wondering about the families they had left behind. Commanders discovered that the idea of destroying a mother and child filled them with an emotion they had no name for, but which humans would recognize as moral revulsion. Something is wrong with the fleet, Admiral Vex, science officer, reported. Multiple ships are reporting crew behavioral anomalies. Admiral Vex felt it too. A strange sensation in his chest, as if something, long frozen, was beginning to thaw. He pushed the feeling aside and focused on his duty. On Earth, the moment of birth arrived. Grace caught the baby as Zara gave one final push. The child emerged glowing with soft light that gradually faded to reveal features that combined the best of both species. It a girl, Grace announced with tears in her eyes, and she perfect. The baby opened eyes that shifted between silver and brown as she looked around the room. She made no sound, but her presence filled the space with an overwhelming sense of peace and connection. Zara held her daughter for the first time and felt something click into place inside her genetic code. This was what she had been meant to become. Not a failed Catherian princess, but the bridge between two worlds. The first of a new kind of being that could unite species through love rather than conquest. What will you name her? Amy asked. Hope, Zara replied, because she represents what both our peoples could become. In orbit above, Earth Admiral Vex felt his resolve cracking as the child energy signature reached his ship. For the first time in his existence, he understood what his sister had been trying to tell. The High Council emotions were not weakness. They were evolution, and his sister had just given birth to the future. Admiral Vex stood on the command bridge of his flagship, watching the blue marble that was Earth slowly rotate beneath him. The energy emanations from the planet had grown stronger since the birth occurred. Now they pulsed with a rhythm that reminded him uncomfortably of a heartbeat. Fleet status report, he commanded. His tactical officer responded with typical Catherian precision. 17 vessels in formation. All weapons systems operational, planetary bombardment arrays charged and ready. But even as the officer spoke, Admiral Vex noticed something wrong in his voice. A slight tremor that had never been there before. The birth event had affected every ship in the fleet, though none of the crew understood what was happening to them. Commander Emma Brooks received the alien ultimatum while standing in the newly constructed war room, deep beneath Cheyenne Mountain. She had been promoted rapidly through the ranks of the Galactic Defense Corps, not because of her tactical brilliance, but because she possessed something the brass considered essential for fighting aliens. She was a mother herself. The Catherian message was broadcast in perfect English, accompanied by holographic images that left no doubt about their intentions. People of Earth. Admiral Vex's voice echoed through the chamber. You harbor a genetic abomination that threatens the purity of advanced civilization. Surrender the defective alien and her offspring within 12 of your hours, or face complete planetary sterilization. Emma stared at the hologram showing detailed plans for destroying every major population center on Earth. The aliens had clearly studied human weak points and knew exactly how much damage would be required to eliminate their species. Ma'am, what are your orders? Asked Colonel Janet Walsh. Emma thought about her own daughter safe in a bunker somewhere in Colorado. Then she thought about Zara holding her newborn child with the same fierce protective love that every mother recognized. We fight, Emma said simply. Nobody threatens our children. Within hours, Earth military forces mobilized with speed that surprised even their own commanders. The hastily assembled fleet consisted of every spacecraft humanity possessed, from military destroyers to converted civilian vessels. Miners, pilots, scientists, and engineers volunteered faster than they could be processed. Dr. Beth Martinez coordinated the technical response from Mission Control. Her team had been studying the energy patterns emanating from Baby Hope, and what they discovered gave Earth forces their only advantage. The child energy signature operates on quantum frequencies that interfere with Cytherian neural networks, Beth explained to the assembled commanders. Every time they get within range, their crew experiences what we would call emotional responses. Can we weaponize this? Emma asked. Not directly, but we can amplify it. The closer our ships get to their fleet, the stronger the effect becomes. Emma nodded. Grimly, then we take the fight to them. The human fleet launched with names that spoke to their motivation. The USS Guardian Angel led the formation, followed by vessels called Mother Pride, Protective Instinct, and Never Again. The crews aboard these ships fought not for territory or resources, but for something the Cytherians could not understand: the right to love and be loved. Captain Nancy Reed commanded the Guardian Angel as it approached the alien formation. Her ship was outgunned, outmatched, and probably doomed, but she pressed forward anyway because 3,000 miles below her surface a mother held her baby and deserved to live in peace. All ships, this is Guardian Angel, Nancy broadcast. Remember why we are here. Remember who we fight for. Remember that love makes us stronger than any technology. The battle began when the Cytherian flagship fired its primary weapon at the approaching human vessels. The energy beam vaporized 2 destroyers instantly, but the remaining ships continued their advance. What the Cytherians had not anticipated was that humans become more dangerous when protecting their young. Nancy ordered ramming speed and aimed her ship directly at Admiral Vex's command vessel. Even as alien weapons tore through her hull, she managed to get close enough for Baby Hope energy field to reach the enemy crew. On the Cytherian flagship, Admiral Vex felt something break inside his mind as the human ship approached. Suddenly, he could see the faces of the crew he was ordering to their deaths. He could feel their fear and determination and love for the families they were trying to protect. For the first time in his existence, Admiral Vex experienced doubt. "Sir, the forward weapon arrays are not responding," reported his tactical officer, and Vex could hear actual concern in the subordinate voice. "Engineering status," Vex demanded. "Multiple systems showing anomalous behavior, sir." The crew report, feeling what they describe as reluctance to fire on the human vessels. Admiral Vex recognized what was happening. The emotional contamination his sister carried was spreading through his fleet like a virus, but instead of weakness, it seemed to be awakening something that had been suppressed for generations on Earth. Zara held her daughter close as she monitored the battle through the facility communication systems. Hope seemed to sense the conflict above them. The baby, glowing, intensified, and her tiny hands reached toward the ceiling as if trying to touch the minds of the warriors in space. "She knows they are there," Zara whispered to Amy, who stood beside her. "Can she affect them from this distance?" Her influence grows stronger as more beings open themselves to emotional connection. Each Cytherian who feels compassion amplifies her signal to others. The tide of battle shifted when Captain Lisa Ford of the destroyer Mother Love managed to ram her ship into a Cytherian cruiser. As both vessels exploded in brilliant fire, the dying human crew broadcast a final message: "For our children," they transmitted, "for the right to love them." Those words reached every Cytherian ship in the battle zone. Translated automatically by their communication systems, the phrase struck alien minds that were already struggling with unfamiliar emotions. On the flagship Shadow of Logic, Commander Dex stared at his weapon controls and found he could not bring himself to fire at the human ships. The beings in those vessels were fighting to protect their young, something that resonated with genetic memories his people had thought were completely erased. "I cannot do this," he announced to his bridge crew. "These humans fight for love and family. We seek to destroy a mother and child. This is wrong." His declaration spread through the ship communication system. Within minutes, half his crew had laid down their weapons. Similar scenes played out across the Cytherian fleet. as soldier after soldier discovered that emotions were not weakness, but strength. Admiral Vex watched in amazement as 7 of his 17 ships powered down their weapons and began withdrawing from the battle. Their commanders reported the same phenomenon, crew members refusing to fight beings who showed such dedication to protecting their families. Dr. Beth Martinez detected the change immediately from her position in mission control. The alien fleet is fragmenting, she reported. Multiple vessels are breaking formation, and their energy signatures indicate weapon systems going offline. Commander Emma Brooks allowed herself a moment of hope. Are they retreating? Some are, but others are still advancing. It looks like the enemy fleet is splitting into 2 factions. On the surface, baby. Hope made soft sounds as she reached her tiny hands toward the sky. Her mother held her close, knowing that this small being was changing the course of galactic history simply by existing. The battle raged for 6 more hours, with the remaining loyal Catherian forces pressing their attack, but they faced an enemy that grew more determined with each ship. Lost human pilots rammed alien vessels in acts of sacrifice that would have seemed insane to logical minds, but which made perfect sense to beings fighting for love. When the surviving human ships finally limped back to Earth, they had lost 60% of their vessels, but the alien threat had been broken. 7 Catherian ships had joined them in retreat, while the remaining forces withdrew to regroup. Admiral Vex found himself alone on his bridge, staring at tactical displays that showed his fleet in shambles. Half his commanders had mutinied not out of ambition, but out of newly awakened conscience. The other half remained loyal, but even they showed signs of the emotional contamination that was spreading through their ranks. He opened a communication channel to Earth, his voice heavy with something he was learning to recognize as regret. Dr. Mitchell, this is Admiral Vex. I wish to speak with my sister. The response came, not from Amy, but from Zara herself, holding her daughter as she addressed her brother across the void of space. Hello, Vex. I wondered when you would remember my name, instead of just calling me the Exile. For the first time in their lives, the Catherian siblings spoke to each other as family instead of genetic resources, and Admiral Vex felt something that had been frozen in his chest for decades finally begin to thaw.